You go.
Well,
Hello,
hello.
everyone.
What?
Hello, hi,
Huh?
and welcome back to the Social Pillar. Um, it's a slightly different theme tonight, but Ian's going to introduce us and tell us all about it.
Yes, indeed. Welcome, everyone. Hello from whatever part of the galaxy you're in, and welcome to the Social Pillar tonight. The ongoing conversation we have about the value of role playing games, their crafts, cultures, and communities in our world. And before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that we're coming to you from Aboriginal land here in Australia. I'm coming to you from Darugland. And we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land we're streaming to you from. Pay our respects to elders past and present. Send those respects to any First Nations people who are watching. We're three forever games masters to welcome you to our conversation. My name is Ian Zammit. I'm part of Roleplay Experience, GM for many years, player for even more, and hoping to engage and connect people around the world with joy and creativity, one table at a time. I also would like to welcome Jared here. Welcome,
Hi.
Jared.
I'm Jared, also known as the GM Chef, professional GM, convention enthusiast, and tabletop maniac. Brainchild of the Social Pillar, and wrangler of GMs for conventions. Thank you for joining us. We are keen to talk about a new RPG system that isn't the world's most popular role-playing game, but probably one of the most popular sci-fi franchises, as hinted by my lovely companions in their uniforms. I sadly have not been involved in such a fandom, but Thea, you most certainly
Hi,
are.
I'm Thea. I'm just enthusiastic. It's great to be here. So tonight we are going to be talking about a new system to me. It's been around for a little while, but it's one that I've only just really started getting into, but one that, as Ian did hint at, has been born out of possibly one of the biggest fandoms in the world. Dare I say universe? Is there proof that it's not? Nobody's told me.
Possibly, yeah. I'd say
Yeah,
so. Yeah, definitely.
I don't see any evidence that it's not. But yeah, Star Trek or Star Trek The Adventure, the RPG. There is a couple of Star Trek based RPGs, but I think this is the one that I play. And this is the one that I want to talk about. So if that's not for you, fight me. Oh wait,
In the
Just
that's
mute
spirit
it.
of Star Trek.
Just put the
in the
volume down
spirit
to
of Star
1%
Trek.
and stay tuned in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a different kind of stream, everybody, tonight. But yeah, so I really wanted to talk about this. And as Ian spoke about last week, one of the slight tweaks that we're making this year these seasons is we are doing a couple of deep dives into certain role-playing systems. D&D is wonderful, but it is not the only system out there. And when we're talking about communities around RPGs, I think we need to start talking about other RPGs. When I say I mean all of us. If you don't, wonderful gentlemen, don't mind me speaking for you, of course.
Not at all.
Please do.
Oh, Dean Dog just made the
Always.
most adorable sound. He's not mic'd up, so you'll just have to imagine it. It's very hot here. So if you see us getting a little bit shiny and slowly shedding uniforms, that is why.
Yeah.
But Star Trek Adventures, and let's see if I can make this appear. But I've got to put myself over the top.
Yes.
This is it. Whee! Is that going to vanish?
Very cool.
So it's made by a company called Modiphius. I may not be saying that correctly, but these guys have been around since about 2012, and they started with a Kickstarter where they were rolling their Achtung Cthulhu RPG, so in the Cthulhu mythos, but not Call of Cthulhu, which I think the three of us are far more familiar with. They designed their D20, 2D20 system, which is the base system that a lot of their RPGs are based on. They're big. They've got so many games. If you have a look at their website, they've got war games, they've got RPGs, they've got board games, they've got tabletops. And they actually seem to be a pretty ethical company. No, I am not sponsored, but from what I've seen of them, I am happy to support them as a company. So I'm probably going to try out some of their other games as well. They're really, I think the latest one they've got out is Dune or Fallout. Maybe
All
Fallout.
right. Cool.
Yeah. So,
Cool.
and that's more of a board game, which looks really interesting. So it's quite exciting.
It's interesting too because it seems like sci-fi bent that they're aiming towards with
Yeah.
those two at least. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought as well, and I thought it was a lot of games that were adapted from movies or TV shows. But when I was having a bit more of a dig around the website, certainly not buying more toys, but just doing research as a good person should.
Yeah.
They have quite a lot of games. So they've got their sort of cool Call of Cthulhu. They've got some more war games, war tabletop type games. They've got they do have a Dune game. I knew that they had a Dune game coming out. And there
I
is
heard about that coming out.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff. It's actually pretty cool. So that's the guys that made this. But Star Trek Adventures, the game, talk about doing research. I didn't look when it came out.
I was
A
going to say,
while.
it's pretty recent.
2020, I think, was when it came out. But don't quote me on that. But there's a lot of books. So I've got the base rule book and the GM's guide, but there's also books that focus on the Klingon Empire, for example, which is pretty exciting. I haven't got any of those because I don't have a book problem and I can say no.
Is there not also a sort of solo supplement called The Captain's Log?
I haven't come across that, but I have been knee-deep in trying to learn just the new system for this because I am, in fact, running a campaign. I've just finished mapping out the episodes to get us to about towards the end of the year, which is all very exciting. Yeah.
Well, can I ask you a question to start it off?
Yeah.
If you don't mind, because thank you for introducing us, and I can't wait that we can do more of this throughout the year, introducing different RPGs. I think the best way to kick it off, particularly, is it'll be you introducing it, Thea. Why do you love Star Trek, and why did you want to dive into this game?
Yeah, I think those are related but different questions. I really like Star Trek. I've liked Star Trek, the series, for a long time. So I think the original season was on. It was repeats, clearly. I'm not that old. But watching repeats when I was still at home before I moved out, so I was a fairly young kid. And then I think at various times I've watched all of the series that were around, so all of the Next Generation, all of Voyager, all of DS9 on DVD. It's a world that I really like the idea of. I like that it is a post-scarcity kind of idea. I like that it is based around a belief in the inherent goodness of people, which I think there's a lot of games out there that really tap into the darker side, grimdark and that kind of thing. And maybe that's really interesting characters. But I think what sets this particular mythos aside is it is based on that fundamental belief that people are good and that good things will win out, which is nice. It's a really positive view of humanity. Yeah,
I like that you said the post-scarcity mindset. And can you explain what you mean by that? Why that's
so Star Trek is really set in a universe. Not all of the people in the universe, but the kind of the people that the basis of it, and certainly Gene Roddenberry's original ideas around what Star Trek was, is that the humans have eliminated hunger, they've eliminated need, they've eliminated war, they've eliminated money. Yay, down with capitalism. Wait, that's me. But they've managed, it's a really, it's utopia, but the good version, not utopia based around actually it's all flawed and it's going to fall apart, but utopia can actually happen. And I think that's that post-scarcity, so that needs are met, therefore people are freed up to self-actualize into their better selves. And so they can explore. And that's where, even though a lot of the trappings around the Star Trek mythos are militaristic, certainly with the original series and mostly for Next Generation and Voyager, it really was, we want to go out and explore. That's our mission. That's our purpose. We want to meet people and we want to make friends with them, which I think is lovely. And I love that as a basis for a game, which ties into that second part of your question, is that this as a system is not based around combat. It has combat mechanics, but that is not the basis of the system, and it's certainly not the main focus of interactions that people have. It's yeah, it's, as Sammy in the chat says, it's a more scientific approach to the universe, to dealing with things. So it's about figuring out what is going on. And the types of missions that they suggest can be exploration, it can be diplomacy, it's scientific, it's all really interesting. And so that's what I like about it as a system, because I think while D&D or other systems don't have to be combat, I think a lot of the time we do fall back on that because there's a lot of rules, they're quite straightforward, and it's easy to run combat. And it kind of falls into that traditional fantasy tropes. You know, there is an evildoer and we shall defeat the evildoer who is trying to destroy the universe. Whereas here, the universe might be in danger, but it's because of some kind of quantum phenomena, and we need to think our way through that rather than brute force it. Yeah.
That's a really good point, because it talks about, I mean, either some physical phenomena or something that's happening in a particular part of the galaxy that they're trying to deal with, or it can be a social clash between different cultures, and that's the issue, and trying to find a way around it that doesn't lead to combat or doesn't lead to war. That it's fascinating for that. And I've been a fan, as you could probably tell. I'm really
it's a
glad.
Subtle thing.
Yeah, you brought it up for today. So briefly on me, because I think we should talk each about this as well and how it's affected us, and we'd love to hear in the chat about you.
Absolutely.
What, for me, I didn't grow up specifically liking Star Trek until I was in high school. I was a Star Wars fan. My father was a Star Trek fan, and we had our division there. And then I found it through Star Trek Next Generation, and I've looked back and been able to watch many of these. And I absolutely agree. That's part of the reason I love the vision of this united front of people that can work together, encouraging difference and engaging in difference, and being able to explore curiosity, and that there can be positive outcome through curiosity, that if we work together. So I love it for that too. And but D&D, like you said as well, is also very much rooted from a wargaming system. So they built the role-playing side of it
chainmail
on top of chainmail. Yeah, exactly. So it kind of always had that as part of its system makeup. So I'm really interested hearing more about this and how this builds the rules around this to meet this kind of vision as well, in this kind of game.
Absolutely. And Jared, your outfit doesn't quite reflect the same level of enrichment I nearly said codependency, but that's not the correct word.
Not quite, no.
You've heard me talk about this game. What do you think?
I mean, undeniably, it is probably one of the most passionate Star fandoms, as in Star Wars, Star Trek, Stargate, as was my sci-fi show and series of choice. It definitely, it's something I want to get into, and you guys have got wonderful recommendations for me to dive into my starting series that I will do. But undeniably, it's proliferated through a lot of media. Big Bang Theory, has touched on D&D, has touched on, Star Trek. They're very enthusiastic. They're comic book fans, all sorts of things like that. And it's probably been, the thing that you would see Trekkies at Comic-Con. It's one of those things that just seems to have proliferated through pop culture as an ultra nerdy but also niche and passionate community. So I've unfortunately not skipped over it, just chosen a different path in terms of what sci-fi show I chose. And there's a lot of parallels that can be made from that. They are explorers of a galaxy, not so much a universe. They have rules of engagement, not so much militaristic, but their unit that goes out is based in the American Air Force, and when they go out, they have pretty similar rules like the exploration teams of Star Trek. They're not really meant to go to a planet and be like, hey, do this is the better way, this is the right way. They're not really meant to interfere. They're not meant to dominate, control, change, influence, or anything like that. They've definitely come to planets that have got big continents on them, and they're in their own war. They're in these horrific situations, and they've come into one of these communities and nations, and they've gone, we could help you, but that's not why we're here. So, and then my inspiration for my chainmail is that, yeah, much like Star Trek, they've come across these civilizations and these nations of people who are not space explorers, and that's also a wonderful appeal for me, is they might encounter civilizations that are far more advanced, far less advanced, and out of this spirit of curiosity and learning and making friends, that's such a beautiful perspective to have. And I think it's kind of in the main sort of theme of tabletop role-playing games, is we just like to play the games. And you know, if we're willing to engage and with an open mind, we might have more fun playing a different system that isn't just, you know, 90% combat rules as per a lot of these systems. And of course, you know, that grimdark fantasy, medieval fantasy is a big thing. It's just a big thing across a lot of cultures and a lot of fandoms and passionate people. So absolutely, I'm very interested to hear how it does conflict resolution, and conflict being the challenge that the players are presented narratively, whether that is, okay, we have to navigate our way through this quantum astral flux storm or whatever tricky things maybe specifically.
No, I think that's actually a really good point to maybe dive in and talk a bit about some of the mechanics, because it is quite a different system to D&D, and I think it's quite a different system to a lot of the games. When I say a lot, I think we've only gone in depth in maybe 2 or 3 games that we have talked about. Because looking at that kind of the basic mechanic, I guess you'd call it, is, you know, what is the thing that needs to happen that people are primarily rolling dice about? And the way that Star Trek Adventures approaches that is to have things divided up into tasks. So a task is the essential thing that a player character will need to do. And the way that the baseline mechanic is, you start with 2 D20s, and oh look, I just happen to have 2 D20s here.
Ooh.
That may, and I don't know if we'll be able to see this, but have Trek insignia on them.
Oh, very cool. Excellent.
Yes.
Now, is that the 20? Which will become foreshadowing for future episodes?
No, it's the 1.
Aha, exactly.
Of course, you did get me, because it is it's the opposite. Oops, as I punched my microphone. You don't want to roll high. And for someone who's grown up with gaming systems where you always want to roll high, it is a complete shift. So when you are rolling, to complete a task, you put together 2 of your, what we would call in D&D, attributes, but in Star Trek The Adventures, you have a trait. No, do you have a trait? Am I calling it the right thing? No, you have I may or may not happen to have all these.
Skill, talent.
It's an ability.
Tenacity.
You have your ability, you have an ability, and you have a discipline. And the GM decides what this particular task requires out of the 2. You add those 2 numbers together. You roll your 2 D20s, and if you get under that number, so your target number is those 2 together, that's a success. And you can buy more D20s if you want to. So there are different mechanisms to get more D20s to increase your ability to pass that. But there are also consequences if you get a critical fail, which is a 20. So it's like, I got a 20. Oh, no. Which is very interesting, watching people who are used to D. They're like, yes, no. Because one thing I like about this system is, similar to Blades in the Dark that we've talked about before, is that when you have a critical fail or things go wrong, you get complications. And a complication can change the environment, or a complication can make things more difficult, or it can add to a threat that is hanging over you like the sword of Damocles. And it's going to come get you at some point, but you're just not sure when. So I really like that as a mechanic. It's relatively straightforward to explain to new players as well. So in the campaign that I'm running, I have a couple of brand new players, a couple of experienced players. So it's not experienced with this system, but experienced tabletop players. So it's been really nice to kind of go through with them. And then the way that each of the gaming sessions is structured, it's kind of like an episode of the TV series. So you can break it up into scenes. And I really like being able to, and I think that's probably suits me as well, I have a somewhat short attention span. I don't think it's a secret that I hate shopping games. I hate the shopping episodes or the let's get dressed and go to a party. That's not for me. I'm just going to start you and we fade in and you're here. And this game actually encourages that. So you have a scene where your party, your crew will enter the scene and then you resolve some particular aspect and then you can move to the next scene. Which is quite good. And then you've got sort of a number of scenes and then that will make your mission. And it's fun. And there's different things. Sorry, there's things about the environment that can make things more difficult or more easy. But yeah, so that's kind of the basic gameplay, I suppose. And you can have you can have your party, so you can have individuals. One of the mechanics that I quite like is that you can have equipment. So it's Star Trek. There's a ship. So there are mechanics for how you utilize the ship as well, which is a lot of fun. Yeah.
That's a key element, isn't it, for Star Trek in particular, to be able to travel across space in their ship, whatever it would be, and the challenges that come with ships. Have you had a chance to look at the mechanics for that bit? Or do you
I have, So when I was having a look at the ships, am I flipping through my notes? Absolutely, I'm flipping through this because it's a lot of fun to do that. So starships have their own rules. And when you're creating a starship, it's similar to when you're creating a character in that they have attributes, they have traits, they have their own attributes, but they're called systems, and they have departments. So they have their own stats. And whenever a player is doing something where the ship is assisting, you treat the ship like another character in that it gives the help action, if you're familiar with D&D, or it gives an assistance, which allows the ship to roll a die, an extra D20, and doesn't have to be the same attributes or even similar attributes that the character is rolling, as long as you can tell a story of how the ship's systems are helping. So, for example, you could have an engineer who was trying to get a lock onto a disabled ship to stop it falling into a star, to steal a story that has never been told 1,000 times in Star Trek. And so the character that was the engineer that was trying to operate, like to save it, you might do something like presence and command or something. So use those two attributes. But the ship, you could use sensors and engineering as which would allow you it would roll against those attributes, you would roll against yours, and all the successes get bunched together.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I feel like I should talk about difficulty. So you don't need, unlike D&D, you don't have to roll over a certain number. Like, I've got to get, if I roll a 1, that's a critical success, and I get 14 successes. Each time you roll under the target number counts as 1 success, and you set difficulty by how many successes you need. So, the difficulty can scale from 1 to 3. Like, it's not a lot. But it's, so it's a different way of thinking about the dice.
And that would be at like, you would progress the story slightly. It would be make such and such a check. I'm guessing here you might tweak one of those abilities or disciplines or something. Maybe the system, if they're on the bridge and they're using the scanners, maybe something else has gone on that's been disabled, so they have to use something else, but they need those 2 or 3 successes to achieve that, and that just adds what I'm envisioning as the typical sort of bridge scene. It's not just straightforward as, we've got everything working all the time. The shields go down, the photon torpedoes, might be disabled for a period of time, and that's something they may not have. They might not have access to that, for example, the classic, ship gets shaken around situation. So, that sounds like a very elegant way of telling a very particular way of, telling a very particular story. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and it's good because it gives, I tend to play fast and loose with rules. I'm not sure if that's ever come across before, but for people that prefer more guidance, the basic rule set, even just the sort of the player's guide and the GM's handbook, give you that guidance to work out what your difficulty should be. And then if you're not sure if the environment is making things more difficult, then there's guidance on, this probably would. So I think it's a good system for helping people feel more confident making those decisions about how difficult or how easy a task should be. So
That's
very helpful.
That's really cool. Yeah.
it's very cool. And sorry, go on.
I was just going to ask, so you said something about helping new games masters run this. Does it come with like a preparatory game, kind of like an initial one to start off with?
Yeah, so in the back of the just the base core rulebook, I was trying to remember. Core rulebook, they're all core rulebooks in terms of every system, but I just couldn't remember the word. It's fine. But in this one, which I keep holding up because it's so pretty, in the back they've got, and the illustrations are gorgeous, really well put together. But in the back of that, there's actually the adventure that they used to play test the game with. And what's nice about that, because it was designed for playtesting, it works through all the mechanics. Interestingly, and I thought this was, I think, possibly reflective of the fact that game designers do tend to default to combat as a way of testing and building mechanics, is one of the first things that they do is they have some tasks, or in the suggested flow of the scene, they have tasks and then there's a combat encounter, which is kind of interesting to me because in the games that I've got planned, I don't have combat planned at all. If it happens, that's a problem. And if any of my players are watching, didn't hear that. And we all know it's a game. Like the players could take it in a lot of directions.
Yeah, it's the option that's available to you, and not unfortunately, but by default, I think just about every tabletop RPG, unless it's engineered to be void of combat, will have some rules because the option is available and it's what people are used to. So
yeah, and I think it also is, it's interesting though, so when it talks about combat, there's really only a sort of a small set of maybe 4 or 5 pages, not even that, a few pages talk about combat conflict, but quite a lot that talks more about social conflict. So you can end up having things like opposed tasks because it's a social. You want to convince the Romulan not to take the brand new weapon that you've just found that you think would possibly destroy a planet. But you don't have anything to offer this particular Romulan. So it's an interesting, there's a lot of guidance provided around how you might approach and how you might resolve that. Sammy's got a question in the chat, which is interesting. That talks about what about modifying systems on the ship, like changing a tractor beam to be able to reverse it. And what that would do mechanically is reduce the difficulty or increase the difficulty. So one of the things that can happen is things can go wrong. You can get a complication. You can roll a 20 and get a critical complication. Or I could have a whole lot of threat built up hanging over the heads of the players. And I might choose as the game master to utilize those to change the situation. So it's a nice balance. And so you can affect it, but it's much more narrative based in terms of whether things are easier or more difficult than a lot of the other systems that I've encountered. And that could just be the systems that I've encountered, but it is certainly so much is decided by the GM. For example, if you are in combat or conflict, then the GM decides based on the story so far who should be going first. So if the story indicates that your party should have the upper hand or be able to initiate this encounter, then they do. If it really makes sense that the NPCs should be initiating it, then they can. And then you pass the action on to the other side, but pass it back to the GM or to the players, and they kind of decide who goes next. It's quite fun.
Yeah, I'm seeing systems these days. Yeah, I'm seeing systems these days come up with unique ways of handling initiative, unique ways of resolving, narrative sort of skill checks and things like that. It's not so much, you come to a point where you just have to roll a thing to overcome, and then you do or you don't, and then you choose a different path. It really comes down to you want to try and do a thing, and then the outcome of the roll dictates whether you did well or bad, and then that immediately affects the narrative. It's not so much it's not so much a pass-fail grade, and there's definitely systems that are leaning into probably horror systems, definitely, that have you succeed but not as well as you want, you fail or you critically fail. I'm seeing systems like that a lot these days as well, and I kind of love that as well, because there's always this chance of more conflict, of scaling that threat, scaling the tension and the pressure. just organically through
Yeah.
mechanics.
And I think it's also, there is a mechanic to keep it balanced as well. So that threat, that sort of Damocles approach, you actually build up tokens. So when things go wrong for the players, say they succeed on a task but they get a complication, or they just fail outright and get complications, the GM gets these, which are, am I holding up the right way? I'm probably not. Yeah, threat tokens. I love physical things to hang on to. And so these can build up for the DM to spend to make things more difficult. And while, like in any RPG, the GM could decide that they're going to make things really hard for their players, this is a nice way of tracking that, oh, actually, I have no threat. The player's been doing things really well. I shouldn't, just because I want to, make it harder for them.
Or right now, it may not make narrative sense. They've fumbled on something, and you're like, "Ooh, you managed to get by." But narratively, maybe it's just, or maybe they've been trying really, really hard, and they just needed that one more success. And the last thing you want to do is be like, "Oh, well, let me just crush your dreams because you just skimmed by, and it's technically raised the threat. So let's just make this even worse for you." You bring it back around, and that I love about being able to track those sorts of things. Very elegant.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about the theatre of GMing before as well, and it's a very nice way. I haven't got it yet, but I want to get those little coin display stands and just put the threat on them.
Yeah. So it's easy to see.
It's easy to see.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they can
cool
feel
thing to have on your screen.
It's like it's an urgency counter. You can see it's getting more urgent as time goes. Oh, it's building up. Yeah.
I want to do that now.
Well, and the players can counter that. So still sticking with mechanics, they get these things called momentum. Am I just showing off my toys? 100% I am.
Yeah.
But momentum tokens are when things go really right for the players. So say they get a 1, critical success, and it was a difficulty 1 task. So you give them a momentum whether they get successes over and above what was required. And so they can build that up. And they can decide to use those to buy extra dice if they're at a particularly critical time. And this has to work. An example from the game we played was and I'll try not to get too much into the story because I could go off on lots and lots of tangents. But the game that we were playing, they had to move a particular artifact into heavy water to stop it from basically melting them. And it was, well, we can't touch it. We're going to knock it, but it has to get into the water first time. So they use momentum to increase that. Yeah, so you can buy more dice. Absolutely, Snyder. So it's quite cool. Or they might just want to use momentum because they want this to go right, trying to convince someone. So it's a nice way of quantifying narrative energy.
That's so eloquently put.
Yeah, it's so much fun. And again, that's a very visual thing. Players can see when they've got a lot of momentum. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah,
tracking
smart.
tracking that stuff, just like you said, Jared, too. I agree. It's so much fun to be able to see it and to visually represent it as part of the system of playing. Yeah. So that means it's also you feel the momentum. You know when you've got that coming up, or the urgency's coming up. Like, we're in deep trouble now. We've got to sort something out and play it safer. So it sounds fascinating.
Yeah, with D&D, the initiative inspiration that they've that came in with 5th edition. It is like, you did a cool thing. You can put that on your sheet, but also you can give it to another player. I recently purchased some nice metal coins that can be used for currency and tokens and tracking and things. And now I give those to my players, and it is so satisfying for them to go, have my inspiration. There's this somatic, this tactile thing where they've gone, here, I'm actually giving, and it's also this beautiful visual reminder. It's a big shiny gold coin, and it sits there, and they can go, and
it reminds them to use it.
It reminds them to use it. It also reminds me to give it, because anyone who's played with me knows that they basically have to beg me for it because I forget to give it organically. And and that's a simple thing. That's hey, you did a cool thing, have a thing to do another cool thing later. Very cool.
Yeah, and it also encourages teamwork because momentum, once you bank it, it's a team asset. So I don't have to just use my momentum. I can use it and say, I really want the pilot to succeed in navigating us through this asteroid field.
Yeah.
And it works. So so mechanically it's set up to encourage. I mean, not all tabletops are ideally going to encourage teamwork, but this one in particular has a lot of those mechanics that encourage people to work together and help each other out.
On that thread, how important is crew composition? As in, do you, from what you've read, obviously, I would say the more you run it, you may realize that maybe it's not so key to whatever particular narrative you're telling. But is it important to have different sort of, you know, engineers and commanders, and have a medic and have a security officer? You know, how important is that?
The impression I get is that ideally you do have a mix. So there's a couple of pre-generated crews that you can get that have, you know, the full gamut from command, security, medical, science and engineering. And from what I've read in the sort of the adventures and guides that I've seen, that is ideal. But you can still get away with it. But I think that's possibly because I've been influenced by my play style, is that I've never really encouraged party balance, as it were. I've always said, play the character that you want to play, and I, as the GM, will make that work. Because I like doing that. But there is something interesting that this game system lets you do, and that's you can play an NPC. So the bane of all GM's lives, we're going to split the party.
Okay.
Or on this mission, we are going to take XYZ and someone's going to stay with the shuttle.
Yeah.
You have the ability to introduce an NPC that you then give to the players and they play that alternate. So people don't need to get left out. They can come along.
That's so smart.
It is. And I love the fact that it gives people a chance to play different types of characters. You know, if you build a pilot, then actually I want to be a doctor. Yeah. On this particular mission, the doctor came and now you are Salat.
That is such an easily transferable concept that I am immediately stealing for my games. Like, I feel like that's such a cool thing. I mean, I feel like in an explorative focused system, probably more relevant. You know, in Dragonbane, where it's all about, you know, you're leaving into a dangerous place, you need everybody there and being capable. It's not, but at the same time, the way that progression works in that system is there's options to train. So there may be days at a time where people need to actually hang back and stay with their teacher. And obviously they could just be like, okay, well, my wizard is learning some new spells and, you know, copying 50 lines of that spell. But I guess I'll just take a ranger out and I'll try that for a session. That is such a cool concept.
And in the character progression, you can also progress those NPCs. So it's not like a leveling system as much. It's a very explicit milestone. So you can have like individual milestones, story milestones. I might be using the wrong terminology, and arc milestones, which kind of scale on. You can make changes to your character. You can increase your attributes. You can you can add a value. You can add a talent, which kind of makes sense with that rank system. And there's a reputation system as well that, I'll be honest, I've not gone into depth nor memorized, but that's there as well. And obviously that's something that will come into play, particularly with the ragtag group that I have in my particular campaign. But into detail about that another time. But yeah, so progressing is you can, when you reach one of these milestones, you can decide, actually, my character's good. I'm going to give those bonuses and those benefits to an NPC that I want to see progress. So it lets
so cool.
players.
I was just thinking that sounds really cool, because you could play with. I love how you said as well that you leave it to the group to play a character they want to play rather than trying to find a party balance, because you have the option of what would balance this out with the NPCs that they're already there. And I can just imagine if you're playing for a while and they don't have a doctor, for example, he comes along. And so you've got the NPC doctor, and because of the gaming style and experiences, that doctor has some very fun moments or whatever. Someone might want to I want to take that. I want to be the doctor in this scene.
Yeah.
And they become this character, and that's great. That's a lot of fun. Yeah.
I do like it. I think it explicitly allows players to explore different characters. And that's actually not something I've seen in any other system. It's always the GM who
Yeah.
introduces the NPCs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is very cool. Actually, I think that's really enabling because, especially I feel like there is this shift in RPGs in general, that there's more empowerment to players in terms of that storytelling side of things. So I think this is that's a cool mechanic to play with.
It is. It really is about story, even the character creation. They've got sort of the lifespan creation where you go through to create a character and it's what's happened in your life. It's where you grew up, and that gives you a set, like your baseline stats. It's what you were educated in, what you chose to do at Starfleet Academy, or if you decided to go the enlisted route. What's happened in your life? There's events that will shape the values, which then have a mechanical effect as you try to do tasks. It's a lot of fun. It really encourages storytelling right from character creation, which is nice.
That's very similar to the Witcher roleplay system, where you are building like your family's lineage, like pre your birth. Like, who was your family? Where did they come from? How did they do? How are they doing? Who are your parents? All of this sort of stuff. So and the system I've seen systems encourage that sort of thing, and it's invaluable to having a very solid foundation and immersion for your character as well.
Yeah. I will say it's also good, though. You don't have to do that. You can also have in-game character creation. So you get the base stats, and then your values and your talents. You can decide, hey, this particular event, we're trying to disable a tachyon bomb, for example. In my past, so it's similar to the Blades in the Dark flashback mechanic, but lifestyle saying, so in the past, I actually was part of a research team that was working on tachyons, and there was an accident and the team were killed. And because of that, I have this value, which now mechanically, and you can introduce that as you play. So one of my players in the campaign, that's what she's decided to do, is we're going to organically grow the background of her character, which is really exciting. So you've got those options, because I know some people can be, and you could be as a new player, new to RPGs entirely, looking at that life cycle creation could be very intimidating. So it's got an option where you don't have to do that.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Particularly Star Trek came up with the terminology of technobabble. So there's not that expectation for people coming into this to think, oh, do I need to know all this stuff about warp core and drive and warp field bubbles and blah, blah, blah. You don't have to. It can be introduced bit by bit so that you can actually understand and adapt to it as well. I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, it's fun. I know we're sort of starting to come up on the end of our time. I could talk about this game for ages, but I would say something about running this game, if that's all right with you guys.
Yeah. I had a couple of questions, actually. You kick it off first, though, if you've got something. So go ahead.
Well, the thing is, I think in terms of if you are a brand new GM, if you have not run any tabletop before, I'm not sure this is the system to start with, to be completely honest. All the information is there, like the resources, even just the core rulebook is great. It gives you everything you need. But in terms of running the game, there is a lot to keep track of as a GM. And I think if you had no experience doing that before, it potentially could get a little bit to overload. And I've been listening to some podcasts of different people playing these. And there's one where it's 5 people who've never played any RPGs before. And you can hear, well, maybe I'm projecting, I don't know, trauma from when I was a baby GM, but I can hear the GM starting to get overwhelmed, and the characters will, like the players will suggest something. It's like, no, you can't.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend last night about his experience where he said, everything I had ready to go, I felt amazing, felt like the energy was there. And then when they didn't go through the door that I needed them to go through, And I was like, it's a skill you do need to develop. It's and juggling and slowly, juggle one. That's how you learn to juggle 3 balls. You throw one ball from hand to hand, and you get that into muscle memory, and then you do the next and the next. And 100%. If you think that that's 3-ball juggling, perhaps it's not.
Yeah. I think if you were going to start this is your first RPG, I wouldn't use all the mechanics. I would start it simple. And that's kind of what I'm doing because it is new to me. And I'd say I'm a fairly experienced GM, and I'm still not using every mechanic. I'm not giving them a ship. My plan is they're not getting a ship until a couple of episodes in, because I want to feel really comfortable with all the other things that are going on.
That's fascinating, because I was just thinking about the new Star Trek film series with Chris Pine and all that, and they're all individual characters that they get to meet before they even get on the ship, and it's all about learning about that first as the introduction before they do anything with the ship. I think that's a really smart idea.
So but it is fun. But I think that was the thought that came to me listening to these podcasts, is that D&D, it is a simpler system. Blades in the Dark, it's a simpler system. So when I've heard new DMs playing it, that's probably, But if you want to have a go, it's still definitely something that I would not say don't do it. I just think it could feel like juggling a lot.
That's interesting too, because I mean, it's one thing is the mechanics as well, and like the like you said, the different elements of that you need to keep track of as you're running the game. So my question to you would be then, in part on that, when it comes to the actual lore of this, it's always great because you can have as long as a piece of string. You can keep it very simple at the beginning with just what worlds or what species or what phenomena that people come across. On that note, what would you really want to play with, without giving spoilers away to your team, but what are you really interested in engaging with the lore that's already out there with Star Trek?
Yeah, look, I think the idea of the kind of archaeological approach, I love the idea of engaging with unknown civilizations' artifacts, the remnants, and is this civilization still around? Is it there? So while I really like the sort of canon lore, I also like some of the more niche, the more obscure things that have come up. So that's something that and that also helps make it, I think, a little more surprising for the story as well. Because if it's the Borg you're encountering, you have a fair idea of how this is going to go. And, of course, you can always write the story and go a different way. But I think that's, I like the idea of exploring some of those more niche things that maybe aren't as fleshed out in the canon. There's certain races that are just great fun. Like Andorians, I love that I've got Andorian characters, because I think that, particularly in some of the more recent series like Strange New Worlds, maybe a fan, the Andorian idea and the Andorian culture has been fleshed out a little bit more. So I like the idea of exploring that. And the books do give you some really nice lore. They give you a lot of detail. And you guys know I'm not always the most detailed person in the world, but I think it is. Yes.
But I completely agree. I think that's part of the exploration, which this whole series, this whole franchise is about. Basically, this universe is about exploration. So you don't want to know everything about things that you haven't seen yet. I think that's a really good point, because then you can create, as a GM and as a group, some of the interesting new species, new phenomena that you come across. Yeah.
Or the stuff that's just mentioned in a single episode, perhaps. Well, let's look at that story. Kind of the idea that Lower Decks have explored is let's figure out what happens when it's not the earth-shattering stuff. It's the person who's cleaning out the holodeck filters. But, the Enterprise exists in this world. The way where my campaign is set is in the Next Generation era. So there is a lot going on at that point, but it's also still quite happy. It's before the Dominion War. It's pleasant.
That's
it ties into what I like about Star Trek. I enjoyed Deep Space Nine, and it explored some of those darker themes. But I really enjoyed the not the utilitarianism, the utopian side of things. As much as I am a cynic, when I play games and I want to be escapist, I want to have a good world.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
It's funny too, because they're actually at this point in the whole Star Trek storylines, they made it very clear with the new Star Trek films that that's a different timeline. And so you actually can completely shift storylines based on where your characters are taking it, where your stories are going. and it may not have even
Yeah.
met certain species or something like that. It could be very interesting.
Like mirror universe. Well, there's more than one mirror universe. We saw that in a couple of episodes, like a TNG episode, where there was just multiples.
Yeah.
So there are those options.
That's so cool.
These are the Voyagers.
Fantastic. Well, is there anything in particular why you like this as well? What makes it in particular about looking at, because you haven't played yet, have you? Is that right?
Yes, I played one game. So we've done session 0, character creation. We've played one game.
Well, what was about that particular experience as well you found that was, if the mechanics helped or the way that it was played or the way the players engaged, that you found was really the core of Star Trek to you? Was there something that came out of that experience?
Yeah, I think, and I have mentioned it, but the focus on tasks rather than conflict resolution. But I think also the episodic and the idea of scenes, there are discrete elements. We've talked about, 3-act structure. It's a really good way to structure a game is, so I've got my rising conflict, my rising to a crescendo in that first scene, something's pending. The second one, something's happened. The third one, we really need to deal with this, and then we're able to resolve it, hopefully. I mean, there's always the potential that things could go very badly wrong. But I really liked, and I think because with this game that I'm playing with Star Trek fans. Hey, B. Redley, how are you? Playing with Star Trek fans. And so they know the lore, they know the characters. And I'm also playing with people who, a couple of them, have been thinking about these characters for a long time. So they've got a lot of backstory that's tied into the lore. So it's a lot of fun bouncing off it. And what I enjoyed, a couple of my players are brand new. They haven't played tabletop before, but really got into sort of bringing in and throwing up elements from their backstory. So one of the characters has been around in the Federation for a long time. And I was like, oh, yeah, so I'd remember this from, I'd go and try and look up these records and I'd go, yes. So it was fun. It was kind of that improvisation that you can get, like with sort of acting and that kind of thing. That was a lot of fun to respond to that. And yeah, it was really good. So I think that's probably what I enjoyed is mechanically it was different. It's nice to do a different system. I think I like that it's a little more complex in terms of than just a single D20 resolving things. There's a little bit more to think about. Yeah, that's probably what I'm thinking.
That complication, I think that's kind of linking to the Star Trek essence as well. It's never one thing that's causing an issue. It's generally more than one thing that has complicated things, and it's trying to resolve multiple things at the same time. I think that's really interesting. Well, I was going to say, if it comes to it, Jared, as well, because you're more new to Star Trek, if you had a chance to play this game, is there anything you'd be wanting to try or play as, considering it's kind of new for you as well?
Yeah.
I guess maybe a little bit of a cop out, but I guess just, like I probably would want to just read through like all the character creation options. And then once I'm familiar, perhaps try that character build as play progresses style, as someone who is this, give me all the info and consume it, and like how much information, where's the homebrew, what's the supplement. I would definitely like to sit down with the core rules, look at all my character options, and just play a race that's unusual, perhaps a class or a role that isn't typical, because I feel like maybe a scientist would be really fun, because I don't think I've ever seen an RPG system that would necessarily have a parallel to that or a trope that would be similar. Like you have a medic, you have a healer, you have an engineer who might be the artificer or, whatever that may be. Like, absolutely would love to just lean into something that is not Star Trek specific, but more unique to that universe. That's what I would be keen to try. And then absolutely, I would just be probably giddy with excitement, not because I would love to go to a planet that I'd heard of, the Romulan homeworld, or, have the Borg Halas or something like that. I know of these things. So I would be giddy with excitement to be like, cool, this is me playing, role playing, and having that contact. Whereas I don't have a predisposition or an expectation for any of this stuff. So I can see the appeal for someone who's already part of the fandom, but as someone who's keen to learn more about it. It's the opportunities that lie out there that are yet to be explored.
Yes. The true spirit of exploration.
Yeah, for sure.
So cool. How about you, Thea? If you got a chance to play a character, is there anything particular you'd like to start with?
So that's interesting. Actually, it's funny, Jared, you saying you'd like to play different players. I just realised that I don't have any humans in my character. Nope, I don't have any humans in the party. None of them created a human. I think one of the pre-gens, was he a human? No, I don't think he was. I don't think I have any, which is interesting because Starfleet is dominated by humans, so I could probably be similar. I think, everybody wants to build their own version of their favourite character. Yeah, but I think it's... Yeah, I like the idea of playing multiple characters, I think. But to be honest, I really enjoy running this game. There's some games that you're like, I really want to play this. But at least for now, I'm really enjoying this. Sammy's suggested maybe some crossover with Mass Effect, have a Krogan as a medical officer. I think that would be fantastic.
Well, I'd be keen to play this game if you're going to run it. So I'd love to
Absolutely.
Play this game. Yeah.
Hey, I'll send you the deets of when we're playing.
That'd be very cool.
But I may run it as a one-shot as a convention because you can actually play as the Enterprise crew. I have the stats of the original Enterprise crew. And the other thing was for people who like online character creation, there is also a website that allows you to do online character creation.
Oh, that's so
very
smart.
Cool.
It's so good.
I'm noticing that
easy way to get into it.
A lot of other systems are leaning into the D&D Beyond popularity and trend, and how it's so easy to just jump on D&D Beyond and go step by step by step. You have a Dungeons and Dragons character. Congratulations. I know that Alien by Free League have just they've definitely announced, I don't know whether it's available yet, but they're going to have a website with a full digital suite of tools. And I think that's just the next way to level up your TTRPG experience. So that's smart.
Yeah. So it's good. I don't have the link, but it is there. And you can also use that to do pre-gens. My party decided to, one played a character he's known for a long time. One of them created a character online of a race that I did not have the details for because not every race is in the core rulebook.
Cool.
No problem with that. None.
That's a cool problem to have. What supplements do you allow?
It is. Do you
good problem to have.
If we can find, see if we can put that link up and we'll put it onto Social Pillar on socials.
That would be very cool.
But we are coming towards the end. Unfortunately, the episode has to wrap up for this Star Trek episode. So,
dun, dun, dun.
Any last words that you have, particularly Thea, from your experience so far?
This has been. I'm really enjoying getting into this new system. And even I think if I wasn't a fan of Star Trek, I think it's a really good thing for all GMs or players to try a different system. It just makes your play feel fresh, you know?
Because it actually, I'm keen as well just to play it because of that difference, and also that it's not combat focused. To try something where you have to solve problems, you have to try like the complications of trying to work with other people as well, or solve some bizarre phenomena that's just affecting everything on a planet or whatever, and just trying like, how are we going to do this, and trying different ways of finding solutions, because I kind of like that. So that just sounds fantastic.
We will definitely have to play, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm making my medic now.
Hey, awesome.
Yeah, so immediately, if we ever wonder why halfway through the stream we're wrapping up, we're like, Jared.
This is the environment, my home world. Yes, very good.
While Jared's doing that, thank you, Thea, for introducing this to us. This is great. I'm really looking forward to it.
I've enjoyed talking about it, so I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thanks, guys. Thank you, everyone out there in our chat, for joining us this week to hear about Star Trek Adventures, a different RPG to get into. We're going to be taking a break from our usual programming next week. We're going to have a little break. However, that means we've got a cozy coming up in its place, which Jared's going to be diving into, and we'll have some information about that presently what that will be. But we'll be back. Thea and I will rejoin Jared in about 2 weeks' time. So we'll come back to our regular programming.
Back to our regular programming. We've got to thank our sponsors. Wait, we don't have.
Not yet. Not yet.
Oh, yeah, it's getting there.
It's getting there.
Actually, Jared,
working towards it.
Do you know what you're thinking about for next week, Jared, in terms of the cozy that you're thinking?
Yeah, we're gonna keep it chill, and I invite one and all to join me in a bit of an old school, reinvigorated sort of hangout. We're doing a fighting fantasy book, but for those of you who have the computers and the Steam,
The old computers.
for the gamings. They actually have all the fighting fantasy books, the choose your own adventure style books are available through this downloadable game on Steam. So I thought it'd be a real cool sort of chat engagement situation where I can just do my voices and narrate everything for everyone. So if you don't want to participate, you can just listen to me doing weird and wonderful voices and tell a cool story. And those of you who do, you guys are going to be able to choose what we do and what choices we make and what pages we turn to. So I thought that'd be a cool thing for us to just do for an hour and a bit. Yeah.
We'll be able to make the choices as in the chat.
100%.
We'll be able to make
100%.
Oh, man.
I am merely a narrator and an observer on the journey. Yes, I will merely be the voice. You guys can decide what each character can sound like, and I will do my darndest to make it so. So that's what's doing next week. Not so much the information edutainment situation, just a chill hangout where we can have enjoy some narrative and some roleplay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Nice.
Fighting fantasy is cool.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, we'll wrap up. So unfortunately, nobody is playing Star Trek Adventures on Twitch that we can raid, but Quinesta,
They will be after this.
Oh, for sure. But Quinesta, who is a friend of the channel, is playing an RPG. He's playing through Final Fantasy, so I recommend we go visit him.
Awesome.
Yes. Go, Quinesta.
Onwards.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you so much. We love you. We'll see you next time. Join the Discord, YouTubes, all of that. We got links. Do the things. You know.
Yeah.
This ain't your first radio.
Feels like it. Jeez.
Thanks, everyone.
The links and the
Thanks, everybody.
Live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper. Thank you, everyone.
See you next time.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.